passing on what you know to family and the importance of family. I think that's the biggest thing.
People have watched Atz Lee Kilcher bravely make his way through the Alaskan desert for years. What if the things you saw on TV weren't really true? Atz Lee Kilcher's life has been marked by a string of bad luck for years, from one public problem to the next, each taking away a small piece of the famous frontier. These bad things didn't just happen by chance. They were kind of like warning signs of a bigger fight that we didn't see. We saw the excitement and the danger on the screen, but we never saw the warnings. We can now link all the pieces together. Problems with the law for Atz Lee Kilcher. With his family by his side, Atz Lee Kilcher became famous as the star of the discovery show Alaska, The Last Frontier. The unique style of the show followed the Kilcher family as they lived in the middle of nowhere in Alaska, far from all modern technology and life. They hunted, fished, farmed, and did whatever else they had to do to stay alive by living off the land. One thing that stood out about Kilcher was how bold he seemed. Everyone looked up to the man he played on TV and in movies. He was not afraid to climb the tallest hills, build cabins in the middle of nowhere, and even go hunting in the cold. On the screen, it looked like nothing could stop him. Outside of work, though, his life took a shocking turn that made for a different story. Turn around. The things that happened to Atz Lee Kilcher were not planned for by anyone, not even his excitement about living in the wild. Fans began to notice that Atz Lee Kilcher didn't seem like himself as the show went on. People were worried about his health because he seemed less social. That's when the health and legal problems started coming up, which caused one of the most shocking changes in the show's history. Back in June 2015, Atz Lee Kilcher was in the middle of an accident that almost killed someone. This is what got people talking. Atz Lee fell off a cliff that was almost 40 feet high while climbing in Otter Cove. Many people were worried about him because they thought he had died because of how badly he was hurt. Because of how hard the straight fall was, Atz Lee broke his arm. He also got holes in both lungs, broke both legs and hips, and cracked a few ribs. There was no doubt that it was a matter of life and death, and he had to spend months in the hospital and even longer getting better. To say the least, this event was upsetting and nerve-wracking, and it affected not only Atz Lee but also his family. You may be thinking how this accident took place, and we'll talk about that right away. It turned out that Atz Lee and his friend Mark had been hiking at Otter Cove. They were still hiking when it got dark, though. Because it was dark, Atz Lee lost his balance and fell off the cliff. He was lucky that his friend had a mobile phone that he could use to call for help. The helicopter of paramedics came just in time, and they quickly took him to the hospital to get help. What would have happened if Mark hadn't been there to call for help is scary to think about. Jane Kilcher, Atz Lee's wife, had no idea what was going on during all of this. She talked about how she knew about her husband's accident. She got a call in the middle of the night while Atz Lee and Mark were hiking. She never in a million years would have thought the call would be so important. She felt terrible when she heard about her husband's fall. Things looked a lot better after the fall. Jane told her Facebook friends about the crash, and Atz later gave his fans an update. He told them about his health and showed them pictures and x-rays of himself taken from his hospital bed. A year after the fall, he shared another picture of himself in the hospital bed with an encouraging caption. A lot of people saw what he wrote on social media about how the accident made him feel weak. He also talked about how hard the past year had been, but that he was still grateful to have his family and friends with him. He thanked his friends. The constant texts and well wishes showed him how much they cared, and he was thankful for everything. He said that even though he had a lot of wounds, they were slowly getting better. He could not hunt or build as much as he used to because of the accident. He also could not shoot as much as he used to. Fans were worried about him while he was away, but Atz Lee made sure he stayed in touch with them through social media. During that time, he often told everyone who helped him how his health was getting better and to thank them. At times, this was very emotional, but it was also the start of legal danger that lies ahead. Then Atz Lee chose to sue the Otter Cove Resort, which is where he fell. For the harm the event caused, he asked for $100,000 in compensation. It was his claim that the incident could have been avoided if the resort had had a good warning sign. Another thing he said was that the resort was dishonest because it didn't have safety measures for guests. In response, the resort said Atz Lee was careless while hiking and wouldn't take blame for the accident. This was the first of many court cases that Atz Lee would have to face. He would be charged with a crime in the next one. This was a surprise to everyone, which makes me wonder what Atz Lee did and how he got away with it. Well, in February 2014, Atz Lee went on a black bear shooting trip in a faraway part of Alaska. However, he and his group chose to use a helicopter to get into the area instead of hiking like you would expect a shooter to do. In Alaska, this was a very big problem, even though it might not seem important. State rules were very strict about protecting wildlife and letting people hunt for fun. In this case, it was definitely against the law to hunt with a chopper. It didn't matter if it was for hunting, tracking, or just moving hunters, their gear, or even raw game. In reality, Atz Lee had done something that was against the law. The Alaska State Troopers began a probe after getting a tip about the flight. Kilcher is charged with a crime, and papers show that he and the other Kilchers were flown to Bradley Lake by helicopter in September 2014 to hunt black bears for an episode that aired in January 2015. Wilma TV, the company that filmed the show, was also charged with a misdemeanor hunting violation for having a way to legally take or try to take game. In February 2015, a year later, Atz Lee was charged with hunting illegally, which was against Alaska's game laws. But everyone's mind turned to the question of how the police even learned about the breach in the first place. Well, Alaska State Trooper spokeswoman Megan Peters said that someone who used to work for a production business told troopers about the illegal hunt. Wilma TV hired the man from Homer, who used to work there, to be a doctor on the set. Wilma TV told the doctor not to tell the helicopter company that was hired to film that there would be hunting going on. After thinking about it, the medic quit the job and told Alaska Wildlife Trooper Trent Chwakowski about the possible hunting in February 2014. In January 2015, Chwakowski saw the episode called Fall Bear Fall, which showed the Kilchers shooting at a black bear. He quickly remembered the story and called the helicopter company. The business told him everything he needed to know. The Kilchers and the film group were flown to Bradley Lake, but they said they didn't know about the planned shooting trip. 3 Wilma TV producers talked to Chwakowski. They told him that they had used a float plane to hunt in a previous show and didn't see any problems with using a helicopter. During a conversation with Chwakowski, Atz Lee Kilcher said that the producers had told him to get a bear. He told the producers that going over by helicopter was against the law, but they told him to go along with it anyway, and everything would be fine. Kevin Fitzgerald, Kilcher's lawyer, said that they didn't do anything wrong because the charge against them was hunting a black bear, but they never actually did that. It's possible that the Kilchers tried to hunt an animal in that episode, but they never actually tried to catch that animal. The lawyer made his point stronger by talking about how reality TV works. He said that sometimes things don't happen like they do on reality TV. But court records showed that Atz Lee wasn't really charged with shooting a bear from a chopper. He was charged with using an airplane to get to a shooting trip. When he was in court, Atz Lee was very good. He did everything that was asked of him and didn't fight against the truth. Instead, he talked about how he saw the whole situation. He said he wasn't trying to break any rules and that he had only used the helicopter to look around the land and not hunt while he was in the air. His goals and point of view couldn't change the fact that he broke the law. So the court said that Atz Lee did break the law by using a helicopter to get to a hunting spot. Atz Lee was given a sentence at the hearing on February 16, 2014. In the Homer District Court case, Judge Margaret Murphy gave Atz Lee Kilcher a $1,500 fine and Wila TV a $17,500 fine for breaking the law. At first, fans, watchers, and the whole country had no idea what was going on. But when people who had watched Alaska, the last frontier, for a long time found out, they were shocked. This case wasn't talked about on the Discovery Channel, and the show kept shooting like nothing was wrong. Fans did, however, notice that the show wasn't quite right. No one knew what was going on behind the scenes at the time. Fans began to notice that Atz Lee wasn't doing anything and hadn't said anything in a long time after the judge's decision. Atz Lee used to post about shooting trips, building adventures, and family times on his social media, but now he only posts about his family. At this point, Atz Lee Kilcher had been told off for doing something illegal, and people were slowly realizing that reality TV shows never really show you everything you need to know. Even though the sentence wasn't too harsh, the case caused a big problem with the production of the show. A lot of bad talk and press about the show, which was to be expected, was not a good sign. Alaska started to look like it. The last border was getting close to the end of its path. Fans began to wonder if Atz Lee's slow exit from the show was because of the court case. The Discovery Channel never said for sure that the legal problem was what killed the show, but it wasn't hard to figure it out. They seemed to have everything under control because things were going well. Fans were heartbroken when they learned in February 2022 that Alaska: The Last Frontier had ended. That there was an abrupt end made me wonder even more. People who liked the show kept wondering why it was ending and if it had anything to do with the legal problems. There was no answer from the production team, which made the rumors and questions even stronger. As time went on, people started to wonder if the cancellation was due to low ratings or if there was something much more complicated going on behind the scenes. The reason why the end happened. All of us were very interested in the reason why Alaska: The Last Frontier stopped. No one was sure of the reason, but slowly, answers started to come out. Remember the 29th of December 2011? Thursday was the day the show ran on Discovery. It wasn't long after it showed before it became a big hit. People loved to watch the Kilcher family as they moved through the harsh winters and old-fashioned world of the woods. But shockingly, the show was dropped in February 2022 after 11 whole seasons. The station never gave an official reason, which left fans wanting to know why their favorite show had to end. It's important to look past all the cameras and on-screen action to really understand why the show was canceled. Instead, dig deep into the lives of everyone who helped make the show a huge hit. At the end of the day, the show wasn't canceled for one reason. It was a mix of personal problems, trouble with the network, and very serious accusations against the production team and some of the show's biggest stars. The tough life the show's biggest stars had to live is a big reason why that might not be as crazy as it sounds. The Kilchers had to deal with the worst scenarios in order to stay alive in the Alaskan wilderness. It was hard for them to stay warm, find food, and get through the cold winters. The family dealt with many problems over the years, but they didn't give up. They had to deal with bad weather and even saw animals. These were things that cameras could never catch. It wasn't always easy for them, but they loved their lives anyway. The sad breakup of Atz Lee Kilcher and Jane Kilcher is another possible reason why the show ended. During the show, they were one of the most liked pairs. People loved watching their relationship because it was so real. The pair was there from the beginning of the show, and their relationship became an important part of what the show was. Without their work together, it was clear that the show would lose a lot of what people liked about it. It was clear that the show was about family life. And after Atz Lee Kilcher and Jane got split, it was very unlikely that the show would be easily renewed. What a mess the breakup made things. Since they were no longer together, one or both of them might have been less active in the show. That meant that the show's plot would have to be interrupted in some way. Folks would have had to get used to the changes, and watchers would have gone from seeing a family bond to seeing a divorce happen. The life-threatening injury Otto of The Last Frontier had to go through is another reason why the show might have stopped. Otto was another cast member from Alaska, The Last Frontier that fans loved. On the show, he was the head of the family and made sure the cows were cared for and treated. He also learned how to fix things on his own. Otto was caught taking care of the cows during a very heavy winter in Alaska, even though the weather wasn't good. So, one of the cows accidentally stepped on him, hurting him badly. He had broken ribs, injured lungs, a broken arm, and other wounds on the inside and outside. He was in such bad shape that his wife wasn't even allowed to visit him in the hospital because of the strict rules for critical care. Thank goodness Otto started to improve with treatment and soon started to get better. It wasn't easy for him to get better, though, and living in the woods as if nothing had happened was very dangerous. It was hard to decide, but Otto's healing had to come first in the end. He made the show so much better, but because of his illness, he couldn't do as well as he normally would. He had to cut down on his time on Homestead, and the show's makers knew it couldn't go on without him. It's possible that Otto's injury was a big reason why the show ended so quickly. So many things could have caused the show to be canceled, and one that made sense was that viewers' tastes were changing. Around the beginning of the 2000s, there were more farm and survival shows. A lot of other shows were able to come in after The Last Frontier. But because more and more people were interested in seeing people live off the grid, the competition also grew. But as time went on, people also lost interest in this style. People were no longer hooked on the Homestead forms because there were so many other reality TV shows to pick from. Now, people were interested in dramas, docuseries, and real crimes. Over time, The Last Frontier lost steam, and soon after, it also lost viewers. The Discovery Channel had to make some tough decisions because of this. It was time to let The Last Frontier go because they had to pick and choose the best shows. Besides the numbers going down, there was another possible reason. It looked like the money problems had gotten out of hand. The costs of making a show like The Last Frontier were high because it was being made in a faraway place. There were a lot of costs involved in making the show, like bringing the crew in and out, dealing with bad weather, and even moving equipment. With a show like this, these costs had to be thought about. And reality shows in cities already had an advantage because they could easily get all the gear they needed. It was hard to follow the steps for a show like The Last Frontier. It took many months of planning and organizing to make just one season. The creative team didn't have a lot of money either. They had to tighten the ropes because the prices of making things were going up. The Last Frontier was getting more and more expensive to run, so the people in charge had to think about their choices. All of these things could be the reason why the show had to end quickly. Without a question, the growing legal battles with the Kilcher family, especially Atz Lee, were the last straw. The show's vibe has changed in a way that can't be repeated since the production team and Atz Lee got involved in the illegal shooting case. A big gap opened up between watchers and the show because of the breaking of hunting ethics, and it didn't end there. There was also a rift between Atz Lee Kilcher and the directors. Atz Lee was directly involved in the claims and was sued, which led to a fine for both him and the production team. The lawsuit's controversy cast a dark shadow over the show, making filming less exciting and making it impossible to recreate the show with the same level of energy. Not as many people watched the show because it had lost its magic. Fans of the show stayed loyal, but the numbers weren't really anything to write home about. Everything started to change after the court case. The show lost its spark and the numbers dropped by a lot. After a while, Atz Lee talked about how the legal problems and the criticism he was getting hurt his emotional health. It was clear from what he wrote on social media how hard the whole thing was on him. He was grateful for the people who helped him. He had to take a break from the show for a while to take care of his health, though. Even though they were under a lot of pressure, the Kilchers had to keep up with their TV-friendly lifestyle during the cast. They had court dates and even full-on investigations to deal with. Even though it was hard, they were able to handle the lawsuit, the production schedule, and even the public's views. Soon, they felt like a wall was closing in on them. And it was clear that the show had to end after 10 years. There was no reason for the show to end because the Kilchers failed. It was because things had changed and they had to adapt. But because of legal problems and changes in what people wanted to see, it was time to move on. Things that happened on the show and in the Kilcher family also live on. What are they doing now? Well, most of them are still on social media, where they share rare updates about life on the farm, music, and family. The last part of a Western love story. It wasn't possible to change the main warning that stopped everyone in their tracks. It came in the form of a public statement that said the frontier love story was over. It had been years since they worked together on camera, but Jane Kilcher made an honest announcement on social media that shocked fans. She told him, "Atz Lee is divorcing me. It's terrible, but I can't stop it." This came as a huge surprise to everyone who had been following their love story for more than 10 years, or who had seen them build and hunt together. The idea of them being a strong team fell apart in an instant, and there were a lot of online speculators and a rumor mill that was going crazy. People began to think that the couple had been having problems for years, but that their problems never showed up on TV. But no one really knows what happened between them. One thing is for sure. The divorce did not happen all of a sudden or by itself. What happened was bound to happen after everything that had happened before. First, it was the trauma that Atz Lee had not dealt with from his youth that affected his relationship. Then there was the part-fabricated story about the extreme stress of living a public life. Lastly, the physical and mental effects of his almost fatal accident could break up any pair. He may have broken more than just his bones in that fall. It's also possible that it broke something small in their relationship. Everyone, not even Jane, didn't see what would happen in the end. The way Jane said what she was going to say was also telling. It seemed like Atz Lee was the one who caused the breakup, and not her. And it showed that there was a deep personal problem going on, maybe on Atz Lee's end. Maybe everything that was said was true. There may have been some mental abandonment going on. Maybe Atz Lee was too busy dealing with his problems to notice his pain, his past, or even his present. Jane Kilcher had kept her family a secret for many years. She never let anyone into her private life, or even put her family and kids in the public eye. The public announcement of the divorce, on the other hand, was the last and most painful break from defending the show's story. It was the clearest proof that the man people thought they knew was going through a lot of personal trouble. They got their last warning when their marriage fell apart. It showed that living a life based on reality TV isn't always possible. At the end of the day, Atz Lee Kilcher's story was a list of alerts. His rough youth and the pain and rebellion he felt against a family history and trauma were the first thing that warned him. The second was a sign that something wasn't quite right. Production put a lot of stress on him, which made it hard to see how his life really was, like when you have to break the rules to put on a show. Then there was the almost fatal event that showed how weak Atz Lee Kilcher really was behind his tough exterior. The last danger sign was when his marriage ended. He had been carrying around a lot of pain and weight, and it was bound to explode at some point. The story of Atz Lee Kilcher is both strong and sad. You can learn from this about how reality TV can change people and how hard it is to live up to what other people expect of you. There were many signs that led to the biggest mental ups and downs Otzi had to go through. These warnings weren't meant to shame Atz Lee. They were meant to help us understand him and see him as more than just a reality star. They helped us see him as a son, a father, and a man trying to find his way back to himself. You should really read about Atz Lee Kilcher because it really opens your eyes to the world of reality TV. His life story is, to say the least, difficult. But now that we know all the red flags, it's easier to understand the person that is Atz Lee Kilcher. What do you think about Atz Lee Kilcher's story? Drop your ideas in the box below. Thanks for seeing. Please click the like button and subscribe if you liked this video. Watch the other videos on your screen before you leave.